All right, so a little late getting on board tonight, doing some putzing around with some brainstorming ideas. So one of the things I want to potentially do in the near future is see if I can download a copy of Microscope and possibly Microscope Explorer, which are both games from Lame Mage. What is it he calls it? Lame Mage Productions. So these are some of the games that he has out there. And this game design, part of the reason I'm fascinated with it is because it's world building. It's a game about world building. What the heck did you just do? No, don't close everything. Oh, for pity's sake. Anyway, the Lame Mage game Microscope that I was looking at. Yeah, I think I just lost everything that I was working on. Super handy. Thanks for doing that. It's a game where you start out with, come up with your premise and you play it with a group of people to design out a game. And so I actually want to see if I can purchase this. I think it would be fun to do with a group of people if I could get a group of people together to do it for the channel. But I need to take a look at it a little bit more to see if it's possible to create a playable version on here. So basically do the game with feedback from the chat on the side here, the live chat. Yeah, you literally just closed all of my windows and you didn't ask me if I wanted you to. That's a total dork move. Oh, you jerk. You jerk. To be fair, I had a fair number of tabs open. There we go. Wow, why would you do that to me? Why would you just kill everything? All right. Anyway, so Microscope and Microscope Explorer. Microscope. Here, see if I can pull it up here. And Lame Mages. So let's see if I can pull up a link for it here. Lame Mage. Okay, so let me see if I can get this. Everybody's making an awful lot of noises. It's trying to do a lot of stuff. So, Microscope. All right, so pull a link here and see if I can drop it in here. See if that works. So that should be his. I'm going to see if maybe I can pull some of that out and play with it, because the gameplay itself is very simple. Structure is just, it's list forming. People propose things and sort of agree to a certain set of limitations or rules. And as you go further, 500-year war. Oh, for pity's sake. Of course it's going to freak out. I did one too many functions on this computer, so it just doesn't want to work with me. All right. Anyway, so you say, like, I want to cover the 500-year war. And then you define what are the big events that define the 500-year war. And then you define certain episodes or character events that happen during those, and then you make scenes about them. And so it's a tool that you can kind of use for storytelling, but it's built out in a way that you can make it gameplay. So a group of you can sit around and just come up with this whole setting and the history of the setting. The thing about Microscope, that's the, like, let's see how they describe it on the website. Want to explore an epic history of your own creation, hundreds of thousands of years long, all in an afternoon? That's the Microscope. You want to play the game in, you won't play the game in chronological order. You can jump back, forward to explore the parts of history that interest you. Want to leap 1,000 years into the future and see how an institution shaped society? Want to jump back to the childhood of the king you just saw assassinated and find out what made him such a hated ruler? That's the sort of thing you do in this game. And so it'd be kind of fun to look at it. The subtitle of it is Microscope, a fractal role-playing game of epic histories. But that's the base game, which is Microscope. There is an expansion, I guess you would call it, called Microscope Explorer. And it's basically taking the same thing, gives you some seeds to generate story ideas if you need to come up with something. And so some of it's like a roll on a table to generate an idea. Some of it's got a few other add-ons that change the game of Microscope a little bit, where Microscope is really just sort of establishing a timeline from the big events or the focus of the timeline to a few scenes within that timeline. But the extensions, the expansion spin-off games are Union, which according to the website, transforms the normal Microscope history into a family tree. You go back and fill in the blanks to explore the lives of ancestors whose unions brought each new generation into existence. So building a family tree of characters, or a historical lineage of heroes, or something like that. And then Chronicle focuses and streamlines Microscope, narrowing the history of the story of a single thing, such as a building, a city, or a ring of power. So you can build back mythology about the One Ring, or a special sword, or so, like, that to me sounds interesting. Family tree sounds kind of interesting too, just because it would be a fun thing to do. And then Echoes lets you muck around with alternate history and cause and effect. Travel back in time and change a single moment and see how that change would echo forward, reshaping your history or utterly destroying it. So these three expansions sound just as much fun as the original Microscope. I don't know how well they would work as a in-chat gameplay thing, but I think it would be fun just to try to see if I don't know how many minimum players you would need. I might see if I can in chat invite some friends over here, and we can just plug it out. And it sounds like, from what I've seen for examples of this, that it's a gameplay that can take several hours, and I don't know that I want to do that. So I maybe break it into 3 or 4 sessions. But I mean, I think it would just be fun to do that and give it a try. That's one of the things I've been doing, and it's not super expensive, so I'll probably just see if I can just grab those 2 things in the next few days. But there's another product that I've been eyeing for a long while here. Well, it's not that long. It's been about 4 or 5 months, I want to say. I've gotten into playing role-playing games on tabletop with some friends, and playing specifically Dungeons and Dragons to a certain amount of frequency, and that's an interesting game in itself. But there are expansions you can get for it, and there's one called there's a old school version of it called Dungeon Crawl Classics, and you can do old school style games with it. But I've heard a few people talk about one of the modules for it, and one of the things you get when you look at some of these game types is you get simple adventures, like a 5-room dungeon you go into and you explore and figure out a mystery or solve a puzzle or beat a monster, something to that effect. But there's a type of arrangement that's called the Mega Dungeon. And the Mega Dungeon are these massive, like Manhattan-sized cities built as dungeons to go through. And basically it's a huge, honestly, this might be bigger than Manhattan, but there's this one that's referred to as by far the biggest and most impressively built mega dungeon ever. It's called the Castle White Rock, and it is essentially how many? Let's see, what does it say? It's 4 books detailing dungeons, 15 levels and 14 sub-levels. And basically what you're looking at here is how many, what is it? 761 pages of information about building a massive world, essentially. A self-contained biodome of a universe. And there are things in there like maps and layouts and characters and history, backstory. There are organizations that compete with each other and support each other. There's a whole just ecosystem that they built within this game system, or this adventure. And so I'm sort of fascinated. It is substantially more expensive than some of the other things out there. And so I'm kind of thinking of putting some money into that, but I don't really want to, like, I'm cheap. I'm a stingy guy. I am not going to dump a crap ton of money on something that I'm going to just play with a little bit. So I go back and forth on this one a little bit. But, I mean, one of the other things I want to potentially spend some of that money towards is resolving some of my gaming systems. Because most of my computers are within the last 5 years. I think most of them are Windows 10 right now. And the problem with that is I want to be able to pull up some of my old games that I played on DOS. And I can't currently do that with my current systems. I'm looking at the possibility of building a Picade and loading ROMs of my favorite games of yesteryear onto it. And then seeing if I can use a device I have that lets me connect, like an old VCR or an old Nintendo or something, up to a TV and potentially also wire it in with a computer to let me record what I'm playing on a TV. So what I end up doing is hooking up a game unit like my old NES or the Pi arcade system, and playing games on a screen like this, while it's also feeding in the video to a laptop like this that I can use OBS to record the screen images while I play the game. And that way I could do the recording of the live stuff, but that setup is actually cheaper than the Castle White Rock. So I might do that one. And I also want to put a little bit of the money that I've got free floating right now. I don't have a lot, but I have a little free floating money right now that I could put towards print tests of different t-shirt designs and stuff to show off. So I'm playing with a little bit of each of those kinds of things. And it's sort of like trying to make the decision of what the right path to go for what I have available right now, which is not much. And the other thing I'm spending an inordinate amount of time doing is doing some of my own world building. It's one of those things that, like, I had some ideas, they fascinated me, and I can't get them out of my head, and so I keep playing with them a little bit on the side. And one of them is my world design for a role-playing game. And so I think I mentioned it before in some of last year's videos where I was talking about doing the what did I call it? The Vestiges, I think was the name I gave the universe. And the basic premise of that was you have a sort of story for the origin of the universe or the cosmos. And in the cosmos came into being creatures like Cthulhu and other monstrous entities. And after that came things like the Titans, and then characters like Zeus. And building from that point of view, a kind of how would the universe of those creatures, what would the top of Mount Olympus be like if you mapped it out in a more modern mythological structure? And then from there, building around the concept of a story that I've been working towards for the overarching story of my game. And that design of the story that I was going for was one where you have the players create characters who, maybe unbeknownst to them or maybe even known to them, they play essentially young gods or minor gods, like the god of the fountain of something or other, some absolutely minor thing. And they're caught in the wake of a sort of conflict that's happening that is going to threaten all of the divine realm. And that the goal for that, spoilers to anybody who might end up playing this, the goal for that is for them to essentially lose. Because in the structure of the story that I'm building with this, you have a cosmos that comes into existence, and out of it is forged the divine realm. And in this divine realm, you have these entities who are divinities of some kind. And these divinities are, the way I imagine them is, if you take your hand and you put it through a surface layer of a lake or a bathtub, the points at which each finger crosses the membrane at the top of the water, they look like separate circles if you're just looking at it from the surface of the water. But it's your whole hand. You've got 5 circles that appear to be disconnected entities on a surface spread apart a great distance. And so I had the same sort of idea of taking that idea of a being made up of smaller beings, and we've only encountered them in a way that we can't comprehend the entirety of them. And that's one part of the aspect of it. The other end of that spectrum that I was looking at was we are made up of individual cells, and each one of our cells, we could harvest some, and the cell could continue to live in a petri dish if we fed it and cared for it right. And so I imagine to a certain degree these divinity characters being like whole beings like us, made out of individual cell like beings who would be humans or whatever you have in your world. And so I had this idea of a conflict among the divinities sort of shattering that over person and setting loose the individual cells with some sort of connection to who they used to belong to. And so what I want the characters to do is start as that whole being and then get shattered, and you have these little vestiges of the former divinity that you kind of hop between. So you do a series of adventures where you travel to different realms, different segments. And so I had these, I like to build multiverses. And in my multiverse for this, you have characters who maybe are in a dungeon, like a medieval type setting, but you have characters like Batman and Superman kind of characters within that realm. And then, you know, in a neighboring realm, you have a universe of Greek mythology with satyrs and Medusas and those types of creatures, but no humans. And then in another one, you can do a zombie apocalypse. And in another one, and I could go through my different series of ideas of short stories that I built up over the years and see if I could convert some of them into individual playing universes. And to a certain degree, it's sort of like Quantum Leap, where Sam Beckett, it's a science fiction series. If you've not seen the old Quantum Leap TV series, you have a doctor who invents a time machine, in this case, that sends him back into the past to inhabit the bodies of people in time where things are going wrong, and he can set those things right. In this case, what I'm looking at doing is not so much doing a time travel, but reality hopping, where the essence of the shattered being, the vestige that remains of that former being, is able to hop between the individual cells, the slivers of the former being, and inhabit their lives and set things right or do something within that realm. And there's an overarching story arc for the main story of that war and trying to get back to where it all happened. But there's also sort of like room for each universe to have its own story, and each character to choose what stories they want to follow. Do they want to go back to where they came from, or do they want to establish something new? And so part of the fun of this is it's not necessarily building a, you know, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens, this happens kind of timeline. It's more about like building a world where all of these things can happen in any number of ways. And so it's a very open-ended construction method for building a world. And I kind of like, I love the idea of just building the playground and letting other people figure out how they're going to interact with it once it's built. And you know, there's a sort of fun and beautiful experience in constructing a world like that. And so, like, of course, like, I want to just keep playing at it. And so that's sort of part of the reason why I feel like this year's going to be a little different for me, where not so much just seeing how many new ideas I can generate and work on, but more along the lines of letting myself get caught up in the excitement and passion for an individual project and letting that be however long it needs to be. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do right now, is just because I'm interested in it and because I'm passionate and excited about it, I want to explore it more. So that's sort of where my brain is. So I'm doing a lot of reading up and catching up and exploring the different things that are out there and existing materials. So getting a sense of, like, there's some old school adventure modules that are like, this little village is under attack by monsters, but the module builds out and explores and details down to the farmer's hut and how many knives he has in his building. And it's like, how crazy an inventory system do you have that the creator of that universe, that adventure, sat down and really kind of read through and explored that and created a world with that much detail in it, because it gives you so many more options to come up with as players in that setting. You know, if you flee back to the farmer's house and he has 12 knives in his kitchen because he likes to, cook stuff with different types of knives, now you have tools to your defense if you're fighting monsters. And, like, the neighbor's house is a baker's house and all he's got is a rolling pin. Whereas the farmer's house, he has 12 knives. And so you have means of protecting and arming other people to help. And it's like, that little bit of detail tells an interesting story. And I love looking at the work of other people over the years in those types of game design and idea settings. And also, like, it helps me think about it a little bit in new ways. Like, if I were to build, say, this universe, this gameplay that I want to do for a tabletop game, if I wanted to translate it over into a computer game, like, if I'm going to make a computer game version of those adventures, you need to really sort of know what you're going to need to set up. So in that case, like the story of the fleeing from monsters and seeking shelter in a building, you have the baker's house or the farmer's house. Being able to go into the farmer's house and loot the house, you have to build the house. You have to hide the things that they can loot when they search it. So, like, really knowing what's there. It's one thing to be able to sit at a table and just make things up on the fly when somebody says, like, yeah, I want to see, like, well, what kind of wood are the chairs made out of? Can I make a club out of one of the legs of the chair, or is it too thin? Would it break easily? Like, that's something a player could do in gameplay at a tabletop game, because I would be sitting at the other end of the table telling them, no, you can't do that. You can't use that chair. Well, you could try to use that chair, but it's a very flimsy chair, and you're not going to do much damage with it if you use it as a protective weapon. But a computer game can't respond right to those improvisations. So it's a little bit more rigid in what it can allow the player to do. And the only way to make that tolerable is to sort of give the player enough options that they get to choose from a lot of options, rather than feeling like it's a yes or no two-direction choice. And so you'd have to say, like, they could go into the baker's house and they could search for things to use in the baker's house, and they could find a rolling pin and that's it. Or they could go to the baker's house, not find what they're looking for to help them, go back over to the farmer's house. Or they can go to the farmer's house first. And so you have to make these contingency plans make it move about and put everything in place that they don't feel like they're starved for options of what they can do in gameplay. So like that, these three aspects of things that I'm thinking about more and more over the course of the day here is sort of like what's absorbing a lot of my brain right now. It's the world building story of Microscope. It's the world building exercise I'm just doing anyway for creating my own stories. And it's the world building exercise of what it would be to translate existing games or my own games over to computer games and what kind of differences in format that requires. And so like that's sort of where I am right now, just kind of enjoying the swimming in that pool. Yeah, we're about half hour in. I'm gonna have, I think tomorrow is the last day of the short week that starts off this year. I think I'll have a little bit more sense of where I want to go for the rest of the month, at least by tomorrow night. So I should be able to give an update tomorrow. I had to make a couple runs after work today for errands, and then been eating very poorly lately, and it's not helping me at all. So I gotta get to bed early tonight so that I can take care of what I need to do tomorrow and be in a better frame of mind to be able to do what I need to do tomorrow. And part of what I need to do tomorrow is have a better sense of what I'm doing for the rest of the month. So I hope to be able to do that. I'm going to hop off tonight, maybe squander a few more minutes of my time tonight before I force myself to go to bed. And then I will catch you tomorrow, hopefully with a little bit more time. I think I've got Sunday, I might have a little bit of time. I don't know that I'll be able to do much during the day. And I have gaming at night with some friends. But I think we're going to be done by 10-ish. So I should be able to come on here on Sunday night. And then we'll see where we go with the week after that. So thanks for joining me. I will catch you later. And take care. And have a good night. I ate poorly and I'm feeling it right now. It's not a good sign. Let's hope today, well, I guess tomorrow goes better.